Imagine waking up in a world where ancient giants still roam the earth. Picture yourself standing in the shadow of a colossal figure, towering over the tallest trees, its footsteps shaking the ground beneath you. This isn't just a scene from a fantasy novel. What if it was real? What if, hidden within the deep recesses of history and DNA, the essence of these giants still lingers among us? It's a thought that sends a shiver down the spine, doesn't it? The Bible speaks of such giants, beings of extraordinary size and strength, known as the Nephilim. These mysterious figures appear in Genesis, described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, Genesis 6:4. Scholars and theologians have puzzled over these verses for centuries, trying to unravel the truth behind the myth. Were they real? Were they metaphorical? Or perhaps more intriguingly, could their DNA still exist in some form today? Let's take a quick journey back in time, to the ancient world where these giants supposedly roamed. The Nephilim, the Anakim, Goliath. These names echo through the halls of history and scripture, stirring the imagination. Goliath, the most famous of these giants, stood over 9 feet tall, according to the Bible. That's taller than most basketball players. Imagine facing off against someone like that. The sheer intimidation would be enough to make anyone reconsider their life choices. Yet David, a mere shepherd boy, brought him down with nothing but a sling and a stone. It's a classic underdog story, one that's been told and retold for millennia. But what if Goliath's story isn't just a tale of ancient heroism? What if there's more to it? Over the years, archaeologists and scientists have unearthed clues, massive skeletons, mysterious artifacts that hint at the existence of such giants. Some dismiss these findings as hoaxes, while others believe they are the remnants of a long-lost race. And then there's the DNA. DNA, the blueprint of life. It's amazing how much information is packed into those tiny strands. If you think about it, DNA is like a time capsule, preserving the secrets of the past within us. Modern science has made incredible strides in decoding these genetic blueprints, uncovering links to our ancestors that we never imagined possible. And yet, there's still so much we don't know. Could it be that, buried deep within the genomes of certain individuals, there lies a fragment of ancient giant DNA? Now, before you start checking your family tree for unusually tall relatives, let's take a moment to consider what this would mean. If such DNA were discovered, it would revolutionize our understanding of history, religion, and even ourselves. It would be like finding a missing piece of a puzzle that has eluded us for centuries. But here's the kicker. What if we've already found it and we just don't know it yet? So what do we do with this tantalizing possibility? Well, it's time to dive deeper, to explore the intersection of ancient scripture and modern science. But before we do that, let's lighten things up a bit. I mean, this is some heavy stuff we're dealing with here. Giants, ancient DNA, world-changing discoveries. So let's take a breather. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend about all this. They might say something like, "So you're telling me that my freakishly tall uncle might be part giant?" And you might respond with a laugh, "Well, if he starts lifting cars or running off to slay dragons, give me a call." All right, back to the matter at hand. The idea that giant DNA could still be among us is both thrilling and, let's be honest, a little terrifying. It's the kind of thing that makes you want to double-check your ancestry. But as we explore this further, we'll need to blend our biblical knowledge with modern-day science. The Bible is rich with stories of giants, and while some might dismiss them as mere mythology, others see them as glimpses into a forgotten past. Perhaps within these stories lies a kernel of truth, waiting to be uncovered by the curious and the brave. As we move forward, we'll explore the scientific possibilities of ancient DNA, how it's preserved, how it's studied, and what it could tell us about these mysterious giants. We'll also take a closer look at the legends themselves, separating fact from fiction, and perhaps finding that the line between the two isn't as clear as we once thought. So grab your sling and your stone, metaphorically of course, and get ready to delve into the world of biblical giants and ancient DNA. The journey promises to be full of surprises, and who knows, you might just discover a giant lurking in your own family tree, or at the very least, in your imagination. So here we are, standing on the edge of a fascinating cliff where ancient stories and modern science come crashing together like waves against the rocks. We've dipped our toes into the world of biblical giants, those towering figures that dominated the ancient landscape and the imaginations of countless generations. But now let's roll up our sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about the science behind it all. Because really, who doesn't love a good science lesson that might just change the way you look at your neighbor's height? DNA. It's that magical code inside each of us that tells our bodies what to do, how to grow, and apparently whether or not we might have some ancient giant lurking in our family history. Think of DNA as the ultimate family recipe, passed down through generations. Sometimes the recipe changes a bit. A little more sugar here, a pinch less salt there, but it's still the same basic blueprint. And every once in a while, you might just find a really old recipe card stuck between the pages of a dusty cookbook that makes you go, wait, what is this doing here? Now let's talk about how scientists are like those dedicated bakers who find that old recipe and decide to whip it up in the kitchen of modern technology. Ancient DNA studies are a bit like finding that secret recipe and trying to recreate it, only to discover that it's written in a language nobody speaks anymore. But with patience, the right tools, and a bit of creativity, you can piece together something pretty amazing. You see, DNA doesn't just stick around forever. It breaks down over time, which makes finding intact ancient DNA kind of like trying to find an intact potato chip at the bottom of a bag that's been sitting in the back of your car for a month. But when scientists do manage to find these snippets of ancient DNA, it's like striking gold. They can compare it to modern DNA and start to see the connections, or sometimes the really surprising differences. And here's where things get really interesting. Scientists have been digging up bones, teeth, and even hair from ancient burial sites for years, searching for that precious DNA that might tell us more about our ancestors. Imagine for a moment that they find a bone fragment in an old Viking grave. Vikings, those legendary warriors who might as well have been giants themselves, tall, fierce, and with a penchant for sailing into the unknown. Now, what if that Viking's DNA had some unusual markers? Something that made the scientists sit up a little straighter and say, hang on, this doesn't look like regular old Viking DNA. Maybe it's a gene that makes someone grow exceptionally tall, or perhaps it's something even more peculiar. Suddenly, the legend of giants doesn't seem quite so far-fetched, does it? And speaking of Vikings, let's just pause for a second to appreciate how cool these guys were. If anyone could pass for a giant, it was them. Tall, broad, with wild hair, and even wilder reputations. I mean, we're talking about people who could row a boat across the North Sea, and then, just for kicks, go pillage a village. But what if some of those legendary Viking traits were, in fact, remnants of something even older? Something from a time when giants really did walk the earth? Let's get back to the science for a moment, because this is where it all comes together. The study of ancient DNA has come a long way in recent years. Scientists can now extract and analyze DNA from bones that are thousands of years old. It's like bringing the past to life, one tiny strand of DNA at a time. And what they're finding is that ancient humans, whether they were giants, Vikings, or just your run-of-the-mill ancestors, have left their mark on us in more ways than we could have imagined. For example, did you know that your eye color, your height, even how well you can tolerate dairy products are all written into your DNA? Now imagine if scientists discovered a gene that was linked to gigantism, a condition that causes people to grow much taller than average. It's a real condition, by the way, and there have been documented cases throughout history. But what if that gene was also a clue, a link back to those biblical giants? Now here's where things start to get a little speculative. What if, and this is a big what if, some of those ancient giants really did leave behind a genetic legacy? What if, hidden within our own DNA, there are traces of those mighty beings from the Bible? It's a tantalizing thought, isn't it? The idea that somewhere, deep down, we might carry the echoes of an ancient race, a race that was so large, so powerful, that they became the stuff of legend. But before we get too carried away, let's remember that science is all about evidence. So far, there's no conclusive proof that the Nephilim, or other biblical giants left behind any specific genetic markers. But the possibility is there, lurking in the shadows of our genetic code, waiting to be discovered. And who knows? Maybe one day a scientist will look at a strand of DNA under a microscope and see something that makes them stop in their tracks. Maybe they'll find a gene that's unlike anything they've seen before, something that defies explanation. And maybe, just maybe, that discovery will lead us one step closer to understanding the mystery of the giants. But until then, we can let our imaginations run wild. We can think about the possibilities, the what-ifs and the maybes, because really that's what makes all of this so much fun. The idea that there might be more to our history, more to us, than we ever realized. So next time you look in the mirror or glance at your unusually tall uncle, just remember, there might be a little bit of giant in all of us. And on that note, let's wrap up our scientific adventure with a smile and a bit of humor. After all, science doesn't have to be all serious and stuffy. Sometimes it's about asking the big questions, wondering what if, and maybe even having a laugh along the way. So here's a thought. Next time you're at a family reunion, why not start a friendly debate over whether or not you've got a bit of giant DNA in your family tree? It's sure to be a conversation starter, and who knows, you might just uncover a few giants of your own. Now, where were we? Yes, the intersection of biblical history and modern science. It's a place where faith meets facts, where ancient stories are brought to life in new and exciting ways. And as we continue to explore this fascinating topic, one thing's for sure, we're in for quite an adventure. So buckle up, because the journey is just beginning. So after all that deep diving into the world of DNA and science, let's take a step back and let our minds wander into the realm of legend. Because let's face it, for every strand of DNA we can analyze, there's a story out there that captures our imagination just as powerfully. And when it comes to giants, the stories are as towering as the beings themselves. Now, you've probably heard of Goliath, the original big man on campus in the Bible. But Goliath wasn't the only giant in ancient lore. No, he was just the tip of the iceberg, or perhaps more fittingly, the tip of the beanstalk. Throughout history, cultures around the world have their own versions of these colossal figures, each with its own twist on what it means to be a giant. And, let's be honest, who doesn't love a good giant story? Take the Greeks, for example. These guys knew how to tell a tale. Their mythology is packed with giants, most famously, the Titans. Imagine being so powerful they had a knockdown, drag-out fight with the gods themselves. These weren't just your run-of-the-mill giants. We're talking about creatures like Atlas, who literally carried the world on his shoulders. Now that's a workout routine I'd like to see at the gym. But the Greeks weren't the only ones who loved a good giant. Over in Norse mythology, you've got the Jotnar, giant beings who were both feared and revered by the gods of Asgard. These giants were as varied as they were enormous, from the frost giants of icy realms to the fire giants of Muspelheim. And just when you think they can't get any more epic, you learn about Ymir, the primordial giant whose body literally became the world. You know, just casual stuff like his bones turning into mountains and his blood forming the oceans. No big deal. But giants weren't just the stuff of mythology. They've also left their mark on the cultures and histories of real-world civilizations. Ever heard of the gigantes from ancient Spain, or the giants of Native American folklore? These stories have been passed down through generations, each retelling adding a new layer of mystery and intrigue. And while we might not take these tales literally today, they offer a fascinating glimpse into how different cultures viewed the world, and how they explained the unexplainable. Now let's talk about the modern-day giants in our world. No, I'm not talking about people who are literally 9 feet tall, although wouldn't that be something? I'm talking about the larger-than-life figures who loom large in our cultural landscape. Think about it. Every sport has its giants. In basketball, you've got players like Shaquille O'Neal, whose presence on the court is nothing short of titanic. And let's not forget the entertainment industry, where stars like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson dominate not just the big screen, but the box office too. These modern-day giants may not have the physical stature of their mythical counterparts, but their impact is just as colossal. And speaking of impact, let's not forget the cultural significance of these legendary giants. Stories of giants often symbolize the struggle between good and evil, the small against the mighty, or humanity's quest to overcome insurmountable odds. Think of David and Goliath, a story that's been told and retold in countless ways. It's the ultimate underdog tale, a reminder that even the smallest among us can take down a giant with the right mix of courage, faith, and a well-aimed stone. But giants also serve as cautionary tales. They remind us of the dangers of pride, excess, and unchecked power. In many legends, giants are brought down by their own flaws, whether it's their greed, their wrath, or simply their inability to fit into a world that's too small for them. These stories resonate with us because they speak to universal truths, wrapped up in a package that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. And yet, as we spin these tales of giants, there's always that lingering question, could they still be among us? I mean, sure, we've got our giants in sports and entertainment, but what about the real deal? What if there are still remnants of those ancient beings tucked away in the far corners of the earth? Or perhaps even closer to home than we think? Now, I'm not saying you should start searching your neighborhood for a secret race of giants, but it's fun to imagine, isn't it? What if the stories of giants didn't end in the distant past, but instead continued on, just out of sight? What if the legends are more than just stories, and there's a kernel of truth hidden within them? And with that thought, we're set up perfectly for the next part of our journey, a journey that will take us from the realms of legend to the modern world. We've talked about giants in the Bible, giants in mythology, and even giants in pop culture. But now it's time to ask the big question, are there still giants among us today? Could there be modern connections to these ancient legends, links that have survived the passage of time? So as we prepare to dive deeper, let's keep our minds open and our imaginations running wild. Because in the world of giants, anything is possible. And who knows, you might just find that the next giant you encounter is a lot closer than you think. So here we are, standing at the crossroads of myth and reality. We've wandered through ancient stories and modern pop culture, and now it's time to face the million-dollar question. Could giants still be among us today? Now I know what you're thinking. Giants? Today? Come on, that's just something out of a fairy tale. But before you dismiss the idea entirely, let's take a little detour into the world of modern rumors, sightings, and those tantalizing little what-ifs that keep us all up at night. Let's start with the stories. You know the kind, those whispers that float around in the dark corners of the internet or get passed down from a friend of a friend. Did you hear about that giant footprint they found in the mountains? Or, I swear my uncle saw a giant once while hiking in the Himalayas. Now, some of these stories are as flimsy as a wet paper towel, but others, well, let's just say they make you think twice. Take, for example, the mysterious case of the Kandahar giant. According to some reports, a group of U.S. soldiers encountered a giant, yes, a literal giant, while on a mission in Afghanistan. The story goes that this massive, red-haired being emerged from a cave, wielding a spear the size of a small tree, and engaged the soldiers in a fierce battle. It's the kind of tale that makes you want to check your closet before going to bed, just in case. Now, do I believe this story? Let's just say it's fun to imagine, but I'll need a bit more evidence before I start building a bunker in my backyard. But that's the thing about legends. They have a way of sticking around, especially when there's just enough mystery to keep them alive. And let's not forget, there are places on this earth that remain largely unexplored. Remote mountains, dense forests, deep caves. Who knows what might be hiding there? Or who? Now, before we all start getting carried away with thoughts of giants stomping around in the wilderness, let's bring it back to something a bit more grounded. Remember that tall cousin of yours? The one who's always hitting his head on door frames and getting asked if he plays basketball? What if I told you that his height might actually be connected to something ancient? All right. Before we jump to conclusions and start planning a family intervention, let's talk about gigantism. Gigantism is a real medical condition that causes excessive growth in humans, usually due to an overproduction of growth hormone. Think of famous cases like Robert Wadlow, who still holds the record as the tallest person in recorded history, standing at a staggering 8 feet 11 inches. That's taller than most doorways, folks. Now, gigantism is rare, but it's very real, and it's fascinating to think about how this condition might tie into our ancient stories of giants. Here's where things get interesting. Could there be a genetic link between the giants of old and cases of gigantism today? Some scientists have speculated that there might be a connection, especially when you consider how traits can be passed down through generations, sometimes skipping a few before re-emerging. Imagine if, somewhere in the DNA of those with gigantism, there's a tiny echo of the Nephilim, a genetic whisper from the past. Of course, this is all speculative, but isn't that part of the fun? The idea that we might carry within us the remnants of ancient beings is both thrilling and just a little bit eerie. It makes you look at your family reunion in a whole new light, doesn't it? But let's not stop there. What if giants didn't just leave behind a genetic footprint? What if they left behind something more tangible? There have been reports, although often contested, of giant skeletons being discovered around the world. Some claim these bones are proof of the giants from our myths, while others dismiss them as nothing more than the bones of large, prehistoric animals. And then there's the fascinating world of anthropology, where researchers sometimes stumble upon oversized bones or skulls that seem a bit off. Are these the remains of ancient giants? Or are they simply anomalies, misinterpreted by eager minds looking to connect the dots between legend and reality? Here's the thing. It's easy to get swept up in these stories. After all, who wouldn't want to believe that giants once roamed the earth and might still exist in some hidden corner of the world? It's the kind of idea that makes the world feel just a little bit more magical, a little bit more mysterious. And in a world where so much is known, it's comforting to think that there are still some secrets out there waiting to be uncovered. But whether or not you believe in modern giants, there's no denying the impact these stories have had on our culture. From the Bible to modern-day movies, giants represent something larger than life, literally and figuratively. They remind us of the power of nature, the dangers of hubris, and the endless possibilities that exist just beyond our understanding. So as we ponder the existence of giants, whether in the past or hidden among us today, let's keep that sense of wonder alive. Let's enjoy the mystery, the what-ifs, and the stories that make our world a little more interesting. And who knows, maybe one day we'll find that definitive proof. A bone, a piece of DNA, a real-life giant footprint that confirms what we've always suspected. The giants, in some form or another, are real. In the meantime, let's keep our eyes open and our imaginations running wild. After all, the world is a big place, and there's always room for a few giants. And next time you see your tall cousin, give him a knowing look, because you just never know. So after pondering whether your cousin's basketball skills might actually be a genetic hand-me-down from an ancient giant, let's take a step into a different kind of adventure. One that involves dusty dig sites, high-tech labs, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. We're talking about the hunt for ancient DNA, the closest thing we've got to a modern-day treasure hunt, minus the pirates and with a lot more lab coats. Now you might be thinking, really? DNA? How exciting could that be? But bear with me, because when you get right down to it, the quest for ancient DNA is like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie, minus the giant rolling boulders and deadly snake pits. Although, if you've ever seen a scientist trying to squeeze ancient DNA out of a bone fragment the size of a tic-tac, you'd realize it's almost as intense. Imagine this. A team of archaeologists digs deep into the earth, unearthing a burial site that hasn't seen the light of day in thousands of years. The air is thick with dust and anticipation. They carefully lift a bone, no larger than your thumb, and everyone holds their breath. This could be it. This could be the fragment that unlocks secrets long buried. Secrets about who these ancient people were, what they looked like, and maybe even how tall they were. But finding ancient DNA is just the first part of the puzzle. The real challenge? Getting that DNA to talk. You see, after thousands of years, DNA starts to break down, fragmenting into tiny pieces that are harder to piece together than a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are missing. And if that's not enough, these ancient samples often get contaminated. Picture a scientist opening a test tube, only to realize that what they thought was 5,000-year-old DNA is actually just a bit of their own lunch. Not exactly the kind of discovery you're hoping for. But let's not sell these scientists short. These folks are modern-day explorers, pioneers who are diving headfirst into the mysteries of the past, armed with cutting-edge technology and an unshakable sense of curiosity. If Indiana Jones had a DNA sequencer, you can bet he'd be right there with them, carefully extracting tiny strands of ancient code while dodging booby traps. Though in this case, the traps are more likely to be lab mishaps than poison darts. And what exactly are these intrepid scientists hoping to find? Well, in some cases, they're searching for answers to some of humanity's biggest questions. Where did we come from? How did we evolve? And of course, the question we're most interested in, could any of this DNA be linked to the giants of old? Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, this sounds cool, but have they actually found anything? The answer is maybe. There have been some tantalizing discoveries over the years, ancient bones that seem larger than usual, DNA samples that don't quite fit the expected patterns. But so far, no one's found a smoking gun, or in this case, a smoking femur, proving that giants once roamed the earth. Still, that hasn't stopped people from speculating. There are plenty of theories out there, ranging from the plausible to the downright wild. Some suggest that the DNA of giants might still exist in trace amounts, hidden within certain populations. Others believe that the discovery of ancient giant DNA could unlock new understandings of human evolution, perhaps revealing a previously unknown branch of our family tree. And then there are the more colorful theories, the ones that involve secret government labs, shadowy organizations, and a global conspiracy to hide the truth about giants from the public. Now, I'm not here to peddle conspiracy theories. After all, I like to keep things rooted in reality. But it's hard to deny the appeal of a good mystery. It's like that feeling you get when you're watching a movie and the hero stumbles upon a hidden clue that changes everything. You just can't look away. But whether or not you buy into these wilder theories, there's no denying the excitement that comes with each new discovery. Every time a scientist cracks open a new sample, there's the potential to rewrite a chapter of our history. And isn't that what makes the hunt for ancient DNA so fascinating? It's the idea that with each tiny breakthrough, we're getting one step closer to understanding where we came from, and maybe even who we are today. So the next time you're watching a movie about treasure hunters or adventurers, take a moment to think about the real-life explorers out there. Those scientists hunched over microscopes, sifting through ancient bones, and decoding the secrets of the past. They might not be swinging from vines or battling ancient curses, but in their own way, they're on a journey every bit as epic. And who knows, maybe one day they'll stumble upon that one piece of DNA that changes everything. A genetic breadcrumb that leads us straight to the giants of old. Until then, we'll just have to keep our imaginations alive and our eyes peeled for the next big discovery. After all, in the world of ancient DNA, there's always another mystery waiting to be uncovered. And who knows, the next time you hear about a new archaeological dig or a groundbreaking scientific discovery, you might just find yourself wondering, could this be the one? The discovery that finally reveals the truth about giants? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, we'll leave the DNA hunting to the experts and continue our own exploration, because there's still so much more to discover about the legends, the stories, and the possibilities that surround the giants of our past. All right, so after our wild adventure through the world of DNA and archaeological digs, let's switch gears a bit and dive back into the realm of biblical interpretations. Because as much as we love the science, and who doesn't love a good old-fashioned treasure hunt, it's the stories and debates around these ancient giants that have really stood the test of time. Now, when it comes to the Bible, there's no shortage of opinions. And when it comes to the Nephilim and giants, well, let's just say scholars have been arguing about this for centuries. You can almost picture them, can't you? Sitting in some ancient library, surrounded by stacks of dusty books, sipping their coffee, or maybe wine, depending on the century, and passionately debating whether the Nephilim were fallen angels, the offspring of divine beings, or just really, really tall humans. Let's start with the basics. The Nephilim are first mentioned in Genesis 6:4, where they're described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. Now, right off the bat, this raises about 1 million questions. Who were these sons of God, and why were their children giants? Some scholars suggest that the sons of God were actually fallen angels, who took human wives, leading to the birth of these enormous beings. It's a theory that definitely adds a supernatural twist to the story, but not everyone's convinced. Other scholars propose that the Nephilim were simply the offspring of human leaders, maybe even kings, who were seen as godlike by their followers. This interpretation makes the giants less otherworldly and more, well, human. Just really, really big humans. But here's the thing. Whether you lean towards the supernatural or the more natural explanations, one thing is clear. These giants had a massive impact on the people of their time. And speaking of debates, let's not forget the theological implications. If the Nephilim were the offspring of fallen angels, what does that mean for our understanding of sin and redemption? It's a question that has kept theologians up at night for generations. On the one hand, it could suggest that sin has a much deeper, more cosmic dimension than we usually think. On the other hand, it might just be a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and overreaching, literally and figuratively. But enough about the scholars. Let's talk about you and me. How do we, as modern readers, reconcile these ancient stories with our own faith and understanding of the world? Personally, I've always found the story of the Nephilim fascinating, not just because of the giants themselves, but because of what they represent. They're a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, some of which we may never fully understand. And that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's what makes life interesting. Take, for example, the idea that there are things in this world that are beyond our comprehension. The Bible is full of these moments, times when God's actions or the events of history seem to defy logic or reason. And yet those are often the moments that have the greatest impact, the ones that challenge us to think deeper, to question our assumptions, and to grow in our faith. I remember a time when I was wrestling with a tough decision. It felt like I was facing a giant of my own, one that seemed impossible to overcome. I prayed, I searched the scriptures, and I sought advice from wise friends. And wouldn't you know it, I stumbled upon the story of David and Goliath. Now I know it's a bit on the nose, right? But there it was, this ancient story about a young boy facing down a giant with nothing but a slingshot and a whole lot of faith. And in that moment, it hit me. Sometimes it's not about having all the answers or the best resources. Sometimes it's about trusting that God has a plan, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And that's why stories like the Nephilim matter. They remind us that the Bible isn't just a collection of ancient texts. It's a living, breathing document that continues to speak to us today. Whether we're dealing with giants in our lives, literally or metaphorically, these stories offer us a way to navigate the challenges we face, grounded in faith and the knowledge that we're not alone. So how do you reconcile these stories with modern science? That's a question only you can answer. Maybe you see the Nephilim as a fascinating part of biblical history, or perhaps you're more interested in the symbolic lessons they offer. Whatever your perspective, the key is to keep an open mind and an open heart. After all, faith and science aren't necessarily at odds. They're two different ways of exploring the same mysteries. And that brings us back to the big question. How do you make sense of the giants in your life? Whether they're physical, emotional, or spiritual, we all face challenges that seem insurmountable at times. But just like David facing Goliath, or the scholars debating the nature of the Nephilim, we have the tools to confront those challenges head-on. Maybe it's faith, maybe it's reason, maybe it's a bit of both. So here's my challenge to you. Take a moment to reflect on the giants in your life. How do you approach them? Do you face them with confidence, like David with his slingshot? Or do you, like the Israelites, tremble at the sight of them? There's no right or wrong answer, but the process of asking the question is what matters. Because in the end, whether we're dealing with giants of the past or the present, the important thing is how we choose to respond. And with that, let's keep this journey going, because there's still so much more to explore. From the depths of ancient texts to the cutting edge of modern science, we're uncovering the layers of history, faith, and mystery that make this topic so endlessly fascinating. So stay curious, stay engaged, and most of all, keep asking those big questions, because you never know where they might lead you. So we've wandered through ancient legends, peeked into the world of DNA, and debated biblical giants over what could easily be a never-ending cup of coffee. Now let's take a moment to step back and look at the bigger picture. What do these stories of giants, whether found in scripture, ancient bones, or in the ever-enthusiastic minds of conspiracy theorists, actually mean for us today? How do they influence our modern faith and our understanding of science? Imagine this. You're cleaning out your attic one weekend, dust everywhere, cobwebs in your hair, and suddenly you stumble upon an old mysterious box. Inside, there's a family heirloom you've never seen before, something that looks ancient and valuable, like it's been passed down through generations. Finding something like that would probably make you feel pretty connected to your past, right? Maybe it's an old pocket watch, or a piece of jewelry with an engraving in a language you don't recognize. Whatever it is, it suddenly makes you feel like a part of something much bigger than yourself. Now think of the discovery of ancient DNA or the exploration of biblical giants in much the same way. These are like the long-lost heirlooms of our collective human history. Finding a snippet of ancient DNA or uncovering evidence that giants might have once walked the earth is like finding that heirloom. It connects us to our past in ways that are both thrilling and profound. It's a reminder that we're not just isolated individuals living in the present moment. We're part of a long, intricate tapestry of life that stretches back to the very beginning of time. But here's where it gets really interesting. How do these ancient discoveries influence our faith today? Let's say, for example, that we did find conclusive evidence of giant DNA, or that we unearthed the remains of a Nephilim. What would that mean for modern religious beliefs? Would it challenge the way we understand the Bible? Or would it reinforce the idea that there are mysteries in our faith that science is only just beginning to uncover? In many ways, the discovery of ancient DNA can be compared to how we handle scientific discoveries in general. Just like finding that old family heirloom, scientific discoveries can either challenge or deepen our faith, depending on how we approach them. It's all about perspective. For some, the idea that science might confirm aspects of biblical history is incredibly affirming. It's like getting a nod from the universe that what you've believed all along was true. For others, these discoveries might raise new questions, pushing them to dig deeper into their faith, to seek answers to questions they never thought to ask before. And then there are those who might see this as a call to re-examine their beliefs entirely, to see how their faith fits into a world that's constantly evolving with each new scientific discovery. One of the great things about faith is that it's not static. It grows, it evolves, and it has the capacity to embrace new ideas and new discoveries. Just like how the church eventually came to terms with the idea that the earth isn't flat, or that we're not the center of the universe, there's room for our understanding of giants, ancient DNA, and other mysteries to grow as well. Think about how much we've learned in just the past century. We've mapped the human genome, sent people to the moon, and even captured images of galaxies millions of light years away. And through it all, many people have found that their faith hasn't diminished. It's expanded. They've come to see the universe as even more awe-inspiring and complex than they ever imagined. And isn't that what faith is all about? Seeing the wonder in the world around us, even as we seek to understand it more deeply. But of course, there's always room for a little humor along the way. I mean, think about it. What if scientists did find giant DNA? Would we suddenly see ads for 23andMe Nephilim edition? Find out if you're part giant with just a simple cheek swab, no slingshots required. And imagine the family reunions. Hey, Uncle Bob, turns out you're 1/10 Nephilim. Guess that explains why you're always winning at tug-of-war. Jokes aside, the potential implications for modern faith are huge. It would spark conversations in churches, mosques, synagogues, and dinner tables around the world. How do we reconcile the wonders of science with the mysteries of faith? Can they coexist, or are they destined to be at odds? The truth is, many people already see them as two sides of the same coin. Science and faith both seek to answer the big questions: where we come from, why we're here, and what happens after we're gone. They just approach those questions from different angles. And when those angles intersect, as they do when we talk about giants, ancient DNA, and biblical history, the conversation becomes all the more rich and meaningful. So as we wrap up this section, I encourage you to take a moment and reflect. How do these ancient stories resonate with you today? Do they make you question, or do they strengthen your faith? Maybe a little of both? And how do you see the relationship between science and faith? Are they partners in the search for truth? Or are they more like friendly rivals, each trying to outdo the other? Whatever your perspective, one thing's for sure. There's no shortage of fascinating discoveries waiting to be made, both in the world of science and in the pages of Scripture. And as we continue to explore these topics, we're bound to find that the lines between the two aren't as clear-cut as we once thought. In fact, they might just be part of the same incredible journey, a journey that takes us from the giants of the past to the endless possibilities of the future. As we bring this journey to a close, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer wonder of it all, the legends of giants, the mysteries of ancient DNA, and the timeless stories that continue to captivate our imaginations. We've traveled through time, from the days of the Nephilim to the cutting-edge labs where scientists sift through the sands of history, all in search of answers to questions as old as humanity itself. And yet, with all we've explored, one thing remains clear. The mystery is far from solved. In fact, the more we learn, the more questions seem to arise. Could there really be remnants of ancient giants buried deep within our DNA, waiting to be discovered? What would it mean for our understanding of the Bible, of history, and of ourselves if such a discovery were made? Would it change the way we see the world, or perhaps the way we see each other? Imagine just for a moment that we did find definitive proof, an ancient strand of DNA that links us back to the giants of old. What would that do to our sense of identity? Would we feel more connected to the past, to the stories that have shaped our cultures and beliefs? Or would it spark new debates, new questions about where we came from and where we're headed? The truth is, these mysteries are part of what makes life so endlessly fascinating. They remind us that no matter how much we think we know, there's always more to discover, more to learn, more to explore, more to wonder about. And in that sense, the search for answers, whether through science, faith, or a combination of both, is as important as the answers themselves. So, where do we go from here? Well, that's up to you. Maybe this journey has sparked a new interest in biblical history, or perhaps you're more intrigued by the scientific side of things. Either way, I invite you to keep exploring, to keep asking questions, and to keep an open mind as you do. After all, the world is full of mysteries just waiting to be uncovered. And who knows? The next big discovery might be just around the corner. And speaking of questions, what do you think? Do you believe that giants once roamed the earth? And if so, could their DNA still be among us today? Or are these stories best left in the realm of legend, where they continue to inspire and intrigue us? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going, because the more perspectives we have, the richer our understanding becomes. Oh, and before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date on all our latest explorations into the mysteries of the past. And who knows, maybe you'll be the first to hear about that next big discovery. Plus, if you enjoyed this journey, share it with a friend. After all, who doesn't love a good story about giants, DNA, and the age-old battle between myth and reality? And on a lighter note, next time you see your tall cousin, maybe ask them if they've done a DNA test lately. Who knows, you might just be related to a giant. Until next time, keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep those questions coming. The world is a big, mysterious place, and that's exactly what makes it so amazing.